Well, thank you
Wonderful,
everyone
Mark.
for the opportunity to share what we're doing at Elevian. I'm going to provide a summary of the company, where we are, dive into the mechanistic effects of GDF11, which are very broad in targeting the physiology of aging, and then talk about what we're doing in terms of our drug development pipeline and plan, and share a little bit about our team. So we are venture-backed, Boston headquartered. We have 20 full-time employees, 38 million raised to date. Like many of the other companies here, our mission is to improve the years that we live healthy. And our sole focus is the protein GDF11, growth differentiation factor 11, and its pathway, which our scientific co-founders at the Harvard Stem Cell Institute and Partners Healthcare discovered play a very important role in regeneration and repair associated with aging, which of course depletes with aging. So we have many years ago now licensed exclusive worldwide access to their patent portfolio, which consists of compositions and methods of use around this GDF11 and the pathway itself. So our lead program now is a recombinant GDF11, a polypeptide, which is the mature domain of the protein, the active form of the protein. And our first indication is promoting motor function recovery in subacute stroke, which is a large unmet need. We're going to dive into that a little bit. So, like many of the other aging longevity biotech companies here, we really have a pipeline in a protein here and more broadly in a pathway, because we have now shown in multiple different preclinical models of different diseases the ability to effectively cure those diseases. So we are now clinic ready. We have GMP product in hand. We're in the midst of our GLP tox studies. We have already finished dog non-GLP showing no adverse events there. We've had our first regulatory meeting with the MHRA, and we are prepping to go into phase 1 study in Australia right now. So let's dive into GDF11. Really exciting that this hits many hallmarks of aging, and some areas that really aren't even identified as hallmarks, but these key areas. So number one is it regenerates our vasculature. So our vasculature deteriorates significantly with age. Our capillaries lose about 50% of their volume. Our arteries harden. Our veins don't work as well. So GDF11 improves all of them across the body. GDF11 activates stem cells. It reduces inflammation and improves metabolism. All these are impaired with age. And all of these leads to our body's inability to effectively repair itself. So let's dive into these a bit. So vascular regeneration, multiple different models here, starting with this on the left from one of our co-founders, Lee Rubin at Harvard, showing that GDF11 restores effectively the brain's vasculature to a youthful state in terms of the overall blood volume. Now, we've also reproduced this ourselves in stroke models, showing similar effects in stroke models, and also this has been published in limb ischemia. So, this is a systemic effect across the body. So in this particular one, you see here, this is a model where it provides induces ischemia in the limbs of mice. And you see on the left here, this on both GDF11 and vehicle, so there's no blood flow. And very limited blood flow in the vehicle-treated animals. And with GDF11 treatment, it restores it to effectively normal function. So we also see effects, as I mentioned, in activating stem cells, again, across the body, many different types of stem cells. So this one on the left, again, from our team, shows the increase of neural progenitor cells. And we see this in neurogenic regions of the brain. We also see, again, from our team, increase in muscle stem cells. So you see here in the young animals, they have a lot more muscle stem cells. And with GDF11 in the young, it's not statistically significant, but there's a trend toward even decreasing. But with the aged animals, they've got about half the stem cell capacity, and GDF11 restores them to effectively youthful stem cells. We see these same effects in endothelial progenitor cells, really activating those stem cells as well. So next, GDF11 has an anti-inflammatory effect, and this impacts multiple different, very complex inflammatory pathways. But really importantly, we see a reduced inflammation leading to improved function in many different preclinical models. So just a couple of these that I highlighted of the different inflammatory diseases above, which are all published in the literature. So this shows a rheumatoid arthritis model. This is a normal animal with rheumatoid arthritis, and then with rheumatoid arthritis and treated with GDF11, effectively restores it to a normal functioning hand. Also in an atherosclerosis model, GDF11 significantly reduces atherosclerotic plaques. So last, metabolism. So this is a really exciting area as well. So we worked with one of the leading mouse metabolism labs in the US. There's 5 of them, NIH-funded mouse metabolism labs, and did studies with GDF11 there. And we were told by our professor, our principal investigator, Jason Kim, that GDF11 has the properties of effectively the best molecule they've seen in these models. So it improves glucose metabolism, it improves insulin sensitivity. So there are molecules that make the pancreas secrete more insulin, but that burns out the pancreas over time. GDF11 actually lowers the basal insulin rate, but then it spikes to glucose load so that pancreas effectively performs much better. And GDF11 reduces fat mass, maintaining lean skeletal muscle mass. So some very exciting, broad findings. Now, with these broad findings, really the question is, what diseases do we target? And there have now been published studies in a number of different preclinical models of disease. And what we've done is really applied filtering criteria now over 5 years since founding the company in 2017 of what are the right diseases to target. So what are large unmet needs, market opportunities, where we can really have a competitive advantage, where there are really translatable models, and very importantly for us, initially a focus on acute disease. So acute indications on a chronic setting has been our initial focus. Why? Because we can get a rapid proof of concept and use less drug as opposed to chronic dosing. So here's our pipeline. So this first area here, short-term IV administration of GDF11. So all of these different acute ischemic and inflammatory events can all be dosed with the same short-term IV duration. So these are all very significant unmet needs. And second, we're working on a topical formulation that uses the exact same protein that we've now figured out how to scale manufacturing of, but puts it into a topical formulation for chronic wound healing. Again, very compelling data there. And longer term, we're going to be developing a long-term IV or subcutaneous formulation to go after chronic diseases. So also we have a program in modulating GDF11. We have an antibody there that targets the pathway and safely increases the activity of GDF11. So diving into this data a little bit. So why stroke? So stroke is a large unmet need. It's the #2 cause of death, the #1 cause of long-term disability. The only drugs to treat stroke have to be given very early in the process. So I'm going to dive into that, kind of the stroke landscape here. So this is ischemic stroke caused by clots. There is a recombinant protein, TPA, which breaks up the clot, but it has to be given within the first 4.5 hours. There's a device called thrombectomy, like a roto-rooter, that can go in and break up the clot, but it's limited to large vessel occlusions. So the combination of these reperfusion therapies are in the best hospitals in the cities in the US, about 20% of patients get these. Now, about half of those patients have remarkable recovery. They can come in paralyzed. Within 24 hours, they're back to normal function. But unfortunately, half of those patients have ongoing deficits. And the other 90%, the other 80% actually of patients, so a total of 90% of patients are effectively an unmet need. Now, there have been many failures in the area of stroke. So it's a bit of a scary area to go in. These failures are in this what's called neuroprotection. So strategies trying to prevent cell death. So those are typically given in this first 24-hour period where there's existing therapy, where it's a medical emergency, and they haven't worked effectively. So we are approaching this differently. So we are going after this 24 to 72 hours, so 1 to 3 days after the stroke, when the patient is stable, the patient's sitting in the hospital, and medicine offers them nothing. get used to your new life being disabled effectively. So very easy to get informed consent, very little happening in the clinic right now, and very exciting. So let's talk about our data here. So we have demonstrated now, we've reproduced this in 6 different studies in our hands where we've dose optimized at different levels. And this is 3 different motor function assays. And this is a rat permanent ischemia model. So as I mentioned, most patients don't get reperfusion therapy. So this is the most translatable model that has a durable deficit. So this here at day -1, this is normal function. So the stroke occurs on day 0. So day 1 is the maximum impairment that we see. And then the red line shows that the vehicle-treated animals do have some degree of spontaneous recovery, which is very similar as in humans. Now, unfortunately, the older you are, the less your spontaneous recovery. Now, when we add GDF11, the drug, we see significant differences here. And in many cases, these animals you can't differentiate from normal function. So we've now repeated this, and we see effects. Effects have been actually reported out in the literature. Up to 7 days after stroke, GDF11 can promote significant recovery. And in our hands, we've optimized to the point where even a single dose can produce durable recovery. So very exciting findings. We also see that in hemorrhagic stroke models, so very different pathophysiology, that GDF11 can promote recovery. So critical limb ischemia is a very different area. It's the same thing. It's where does the clot occur? If it occurs in the brain, we call it a stroke. If it occurs in the heart, we call it a heart attack. If it occurs in the limbs, we call it critical limb ischemia. So again, very exciting data in terms of restoring blood flow and improving ambulation. So a very different area, acute inflammatory events. So acute pancreatitis, another significant unmet need. So you get pancreatitis. I'm a doctor. It hasn't changed since I practiced 20 years ago. If a patient goes into the hospital with pancreatitis, they're in severe pain. We give them fluids and pain management. So GDF11 can protect tissue necrosis, pancreatic tissues, from dying in pancreatic models, and reduces the amylase and lipase, the serum measures of pathology in pancreatitis, as well as a number of inflammatory markers. So next is this wound healing. So very exciting data again in wound healing, showing that GDF11 can accelerate the healing in diabetic wounds and also reduce injury after UV light injury. So let's talk about our development plan. So we have, as I mentioned, GMP product in hand. We're doing final analytics on that right now. It's already vialed. We're in the midst of our IND enabling tox studies. We're planning to go into phase 1 studies in first half of next year. And that opens up the door for multiple different indications. So we have enough product in hand to do the early phase 2 studies, but we'll have to produce more product to do a larger set of studies. So our team, my background, medical doctor turned serial tech entrepreneur, have a team of drug development veterans that have collectively produced billions of dollars of exit value. We have people in place in every one of our key roles, from manufacturing to R&D to clinical development. And last, wanted to mention while we're here that we just opened up a financing to fund this first clinical trial. So if you're interested in this, we have a lead for this, and it's to fund our phase 1 study and to get us ready to do multiple phase 2 studies in acute indications, and also explore pharma partnerships, which we're in active discussions right now. So with that, I wanted to open up to questions. Please feel free to contact me.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's exciting, and I believe your company is one, if not the only, that is able to do an acute run into clinic to build out to a more chronic approach. And that's actually very time efficient, and we're going to be watching.